A city council meeting is interrupted by a protester yelling, "Tell them who you really are, Jay." Cameras flash. Security swarms. And Jermaine's calm face turns to stone as the old mugshot is held up before the crowd. Councilman Jermaine Rollins was the pride of Westview Heights, an Ivy League grad, a passionate housing advocate, and the youngest black elected official in the city's history. But when an old photograph emerges online of him in a prison jumpsuit taken 18 years ago in Louisiana under a different name, the city erupts. A local reporter named Layla Brent starts digging. What she finds is buried deeper than a sealed juvenile record. Rollins wasn't just locked up. He was allegedly part of a now-defunct gang tied to a string of unsolved murders. But why has no trace of this ever appeared in his background checks? As Layla follows the trail, she uncovers a quiet deal made between a federal witness protection program, a dead civil rights attorney, and a corrupt detective who vanished years ago. What begins as political scandal spirals into a dangerous reckoning with systemic cover-ups, survivor guilt, and the price of redemption. Before we uncover today's case, a quick reminder. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single clue, twist, or breakthrough in the stories to come. Now, let's dive into the case. The City Council chambers of Westview Heights hadn't seen this much tension since the highway expansion project divided the district lines last spring. The air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters lined the back row, fingers ready on their phones, and an elderly woman in the second row dabbed at her forehead with a church fan printed with Jermaine Rollins' smiling face. Councilman Rollins stood tall behind the podium. Black suit, maroon tie, and that familiar even tone call, collected like he was built for crisis. And with unanimous approval, this resolution allows $4.2 million in grant funds to be redirected toward youth workforce programs, particularly in District 6, where, "Tell them who you really are, Jay." A voice cut through the chamber like a blade. All heads turned. Near the chamber doors, a young man in a worn hoodie stood on a bench, face half hidden under a baseball cap. He held up a laminated 8x11 photo high in the air. "Tell them what you did in Opelousas, or should I?" Security rushed. One officer grabbed the man's wrist while another yanked the photo from his hand. But not before everyone saw it. The image, slightly faded, scanned from an old intake file, was of a younger Jermaine Rollins. Same jawline, same sharp eyes. But this Jermaine wore an orange dock jumpsuit, inmate ID clipped to his chest. The name read, Jamal King. The chamber erupted. Gasps, clicks, a flurry of whispered disbelief. Jermaine didn't move. Not a blink, not a word. Layla Brent, sitting 2 rows behind the press bench, felt her notebook slip slightly from her hand. She didn't reach for it. She was watching his face, watching what didn't happen. No panic, no denial, just stillness. That evening, Westview Heights was split in two. Half the city was glued to the evening news. The other half was already arguing online about whether it was real, doctored, or politically motivated. Channel 4 ran a loop of the photos side by side with Jermaine's official city portrait. Twitter hashtags like hashtag Councilman Khan and hashtag Jamal King Truth trended within an hour. Jermaine Rollins released a short statement through his office by 9 p.m. "I will not respond to claims made through ambush or spectacle. I remain committed to serving the people of this city with transparency and dignity. No denial, no explanation. Just more questions. Layla Brent sat in her car outside City Hall, her laptop balanced on her knees, coffee growing cold in the Q folder. She hadn't written a word. Not because she didn't have a story, but because she knew something was wrong with the way it unfolded. She'd met Jermaine, interviewed him 3 times. There were no gaps, no red flags in his background, or so she thought. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Brent?" a raspy voice asked. "You don't know me, but I know that name. Jamal King. He did time at St. Landry Parish Juvenile Detention. Only way you get out clean from there is if somebody buries your file, or dies with it." Click. She stared at the screen. St. Landry. That was in Louisiana, where Jermaine said he was raised until age 10 before his aunt brought him north. She remembered the quote from an old profile piece. "I grew up in church and boxing gyms. You stay moving or you get swallowed." She pulled up the Department of Corrections site, typed Jamal King, birth year 1986, Opelousas, status, record expunged, juvenile file sealed. No mugshot, but she had it now. That laminated photo, captured by a local TV crew before it was yanked away. Later that night, Layla parked in front of a narrow brick house on Fenton Street, just 3 blocks from the middle school named after Frederick Douglass. She wasn't there to confront Jermaine, not yet. She was there for Sister Alma, the woman who raised him after his parents passed in a car accident. The porch light flickered as she knocked. An elderly black woman in a green housecoat opened the door. She peered at Layla over her glasses, expression tight. "I'm sorry to disturb you, ma'am. I'm Layla Brent with the Herald. I just have a few questions about your nephew, Councilman Rollins." Alma sighed like someone whose breath had been held for years. "You came for the truth?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Well, then, come in. But I'll tell you, now truth ain't never been free. And if you really want it, baby girl, you better be ready to pay for it." The smell of cloves and mothballs hit Layla the moment she stepped into the house. It was warm, too warm, the kind of heat that clung to your skin like memories that wouldn't let go. Sister Alma didn't offer tea. She didn't ask Layla to sit. She just walked toward a cluttered living room lined with old photographs and Bible verses scrawled in gold ink. Layla followed, notebook in hand, pulse in her throat. "He didn't lie to y'all," Alma said, settling into a creaky chair by the window. "He just survived. And survival don't come with neat little labels." Layla waited. "I met Jamal when he was 9, scared out his mind. Didn't even talk for the first 2 months. His mama, my baby sister, was gone. Car flipped off the levee. The boy was in the back seat, barely breathing. They pulled his daddy's body from the bayou 2 days later, full of liquor and lies." "And after that?" Layla asked. Alma looked out the window like the streetlights held the answer. "Foster bounced him round like a pinball. Ended up in a place called Hollow Creek Halfway House, but they shut that down real quiet. Too many kids turned up missing." Layla's pen slowed. "You saying there were ... disappearances?" she asked. "I'm saying no one looked when they vanished," Alma replied flatly. "And Jamal? He got mixed up with some boys who called themselves the Bay Runners. Thought they were family. Thought they'd protect him. Was he in a gang?" Alma gave her a hard look. "He was a child with no safe place. That ain't the same as a gangster." 2 hours later, Layla sat in her car outside Alma's house, her recorder still running. There were 3 names she scribbled underlined: Bay Runners, Hollow Creek, St. Landry Parish. She typed quickly on her phone, searching public court records, old news reports, anything on Hollow Creek. Nothing, except a forum thread from 2007 on a now-defunct message board archived online. The subject line read, "Anyone remember Hollow Creek in Opelousas?" One reply stood out. "Used to work janitorial there before it closed. Kids came in broken. Some left worse. COs ran that place like a dogfight ring. We weren't allowed in B Hall past 8 p.m. One boy, Jamal King, wrote a letter to the ag. Whole place got cleaned out 6 months later. Never heard from the kid again. Username, Creole_84. Layla clicked the profile. No posts since 2011, but the account had an email, Creole_84@yahoo.com. She sent a message immediately. The next day, her editor called. "Layla, you poking into sealed juvenile records now?" He snapped. "I'm not publishing anything yet," she said calmly. "But this isn't just a scandal. It's a cover-up that crosses state lines. You're playing with fire, Brent. Rollins has friends at the governor's office. You run this without solid sourcing, and you'll be hung out to dry. I've got a source who worked at Hollow Creek. If I can get him on record." "You've got 48 hours, he cut in. "Get something printable. Otherwise, we bury it." "Understood?" That night, her burner phone buzzed at 11:41 p.m. Unknown number. She answered. "You sent the email?" The voice asked. Male. Older. Slight Cajun drawl. "Yes, are you Creole_84? Long pause. "I ain't giving my name. But I can tell you this. Jamal King saved 3 boys' lives when he testified. The DA wanted to make an example of him, but a civil rights attorney from Baton Rouge cut a deal with the feds. Witness protection, but only if they buried the file deep. And now it's resurfaced," Layla whispered. "Somebody wants him taken down. And if they're bringing up Jamal King, it ain't politics, it's payback. Why now? You figure that out, Miss Reporter, but watch your back. 'Cause if the Bay Runners are crawling out the woodwork, this city don't know what's coming." Click. Meanwhile, across town, Councilman Jermaine Rollins sat alone in his campaign office. The lights were off except for the glow of a single lamp. In his hands, he held a faded envelope. Inside, a photo. The same one the protester held up in the council chamber, except his had writing on the back, in ink faded from time and weather. 3 words. "They know now." The photo sat on Jermaine's desk like a lit match on dry grass. He stared at it, jaw tight, thumb pressed into the edge as if pressure could erase the ink. The 3 words, "they know now," didn't scare him. Not exactly. But they meant the ghosts he buried weren't staying quiet anymore. He slid the envelope into a drawer and locked it, then leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning slow above his head. He thought of Marcus Hill, of that cold night in B Hall when everything went sideways, and of the man who helped him disappear. Layla Brent was back at her apartment, eyes bloodshot from combing through a decade of court records. No hits on Jamal King, no records on Hollow Creek, not even sealed ones. It was like someone had gone in and wiped the archives clean. She switched tabs to check her inbox again. Nothing from the janitor's source. But one email caught her eye. Subject: "You're not the only one asking questions." From no-reply@traceyourpath.net. Message. They're trying to reopen a case from 2005. Something about Marcus Hill. You dig there. You'll find blood on more than just Jamal King's hands. Layla's hands froze over the keyboard. She searched Marcus Hill 2005 Opelousas, Louisiana. The first hit was a tiny article from a Louisiana local archive. Marcus Hill, 17, was found dead behind the detention center fence at Hollow Creek. Official cause, suicide. No autopsy released. No surveillance footage recovered. Case closed. She copied the headline and sat back. Why now? She whispered to herself. What case could someone possibly be trying to reopen? And why was Jermaine Rollins' name buried in it? At City Hall, pressure was mounting. A special emergency session had been called behind closed doors. Council members whispered in corners, some nervous, others calculating. Councilwoman Patrice Mallory Rollins' fiercest political opponent leaned over the table. We need to suspend him pending review, she said sharply. There's no proof he did anything wrong, replied another councilman. Juvenile records are sealed for a reason. He lied to get elected. He survived, another voice said quietly from the end of the table. They all turned to see Reverend Paul Demps, head of the Ethics Committee and longtime ally of Jermaine. He survived, the Reverend repeated. And built something from the ashes, Patrice sneered. That something may have been built on a corpse. The room fell silent. Later that afternoon, Layla was followed. She noticed the gray Chevy trailing her near 43rd and Morgan. She took a left. It followed. She took another. Still there. Her heart pounded. She pulled into a crowded gas station, parked, and went straight into the store. Through the window, she watched as the Chevy slowed, then sped off. She took out her phone and called the number from the burner account. It rang, then rang again. Finally, a voice answered. You're not safe digging this up. Who killed Marcus Hill? Layla demanded. That's not the question you should be asking. Then what is? Who covered it up? Click. That night, she sat in the dark of her kitchen, phone to her ear, calling someone she never thought she'd have reason to reach out to again. Her older brother, Detective Trent Brent. They hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not since the fight over their father's estate. But this wasn't personal beef anymore. This was life and death. He answered on the second ring. Layla? I need help. Quietly. A pause. Then his voice softened. What's going on? I think someone's trying to kill a story I haven't even published yet. Another silence. Then, send me everything you have. At the same time, Jermaine Rollins drove out of Westview Heights, past the city limits, onto a 2-lane road flanked by woods and silence. He pulled off onto a gravel shoulder and stepped out, dust clinging to his shoes. Ahead stood a rusted old shack. He walked to the door, knocked once. An old man answered. Bald, white beard, dark eyes. You were told not to come here again, the man growled. Jermaine looked him in the eye. They reopened the Hill file. The old man didn't blink. They won't stop, will they? Jermaine asked. No, he said quietly. They never do. Especially when it's their blood on the file. The shack smelled like oil and mold, and the old man once known in certain circles as Deputy Warden Kenneth Bryce limped toward a safe behind a panel of rotting wood. I never kept files, only threats, he muttered as he opened the rusted door and pulled out a battered shoebox. Inside, cassette tapes, old microfilm, and a yellowing manila envelope. Jermaine watched silently. "Your boy Marcus," Bryce said, dropping the envelope on the table. "He didn't hang himself. He tried to testify. I told you then, we don't let that kind of talk survive." Jermaine's throat tightened. "And the others?" Bryce chuckled darkly. "Gone. Ghosts in the river, same as you should have been. Only difference is, that civil rights lawyer had enough dirt to make you valuable. But we only erased you. The rest, erased and forgotten." Jermaine picked up the envelope and stared at the evidence inside old intake logs, restraint records, and a photograph of Marcus Hill's bruised body, time-stamped 1 day before his reported death. "You think they'll bury this again?" Jermaine asked. Bryce didn't answer, because by then, Jermaine had already dialed a number. "Layla Brent," he said when the line picked up. "Meet me at Hollow Creek. Tomorrow. Bring your brother." Then he hung up. The next day, the three of them stood at the rusted gates of the old juvenile facility, Layla with her camera and recorder, Detective Trent Brent armed with a badge and a quiet readiness. Jermaine didn't speak at first. He simply handed Layla the envelope. "This is the real story," he said, "not the photo. Not the council seat, Marcus Hill, what they did to him, what they made me witness." Layla opened the file. She didn't flinch. She didn't question. She just listened. As Jermaine told it all, how Marcus tried to stop a guard from abusing another boy, how they locked him in solitary for 3 days without food, how Jermaine had helped him draft a letter to the DOJ, and how Marcus disappeared 2 nights later. They were told he ran away. The next morning, they found him hanging behind the fence with his tongue swollen and fingernails cracked from clawing at the wire. "But I saw," Jermaine whispered. "They killed him. And they made me lie. Told me I'd be next." He turned to Trent. "That's your confession, detective. You want to arrest me now?" Trent didn't move, because what he saw in Jermaine wasn't guilt, it was survival. And what he saw in the papers was bigger than any juvenile record. That evening, Layla published the story. The Marcus Hill Files. What a city buried to protect a system. She didn't focus on scandal. She focused on truth. She printed the names, redacted where necessary, linked to sealed settlements in Baton Rouge, and published stills from the tapes found in Bryce's shack. A 14-minute video confession from Jermaine Rollins accompanied the piece, raw and unfiltered. "I was a kid who survived," he said in the video. "Not because I was innocent, but because someone thought I might still be useful. And I've spent every day since trying to be." Within hours, the story went national. Protests broke out. Some people called for Jermaine's resignation. Others called him a hero. But most did something rare. They listened. 2 weeks later, Jermaine stood in front of the Marcus Hill Memorial Garden, where Hollow Creek used to be. He didn't run for re-election. Didn't disappear either. He walked the neighborhoods, spoke to young boys caught between foster homes and gang corners, sat in courtrooms advocating for juvenile reform, started a nonprofit with Layla and Trent's help called Survivor's Ledger, archiving stories from those who never made it into the system's light. He never denied his past again, because now the city knew. And still, some tried to tear him down. But most especially, the forgotten kids of Westview looked at him and saw something different. Not a reformer, not a politician, but a man who turned the ashes they left him into something that burned back. The end. This story wasn't just about one case. It was about how quickly truth can vanish when assumptions replace evidence, and how unchecked authority becomes a weapon instead of a shield. It was about fear, how it twists judgment, silences witnesses, and turns policy into harm. But more than anything, it was about dignity and the fight to hold on to it. For every family who never got the apology. For every name that was buried under suspicion instead of cleared by justice. For every child forced to grow up the moment someone else decided they looked guilty. So if this story made you feel something, don't let it end with sympathy. Let it push you to ask harder questions, to challenge what's hidden, and to care before the sirens start. You don't need a badge to speak the truth. You just need to know when silence becomes complicated. If this story spoke to you, like, share, and comment. Because conversations lead to awareness. And awareness? That's where justice begins.